Welcome to episode 11 of Let's Rage Together, a podcast where two friends talk about the politics of total liberation and related topics.
We annihilated the world before your very ears.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey, it's episode 11 of Let's Rage Together. I'm Pete.
And I'm Taryn.
And if this is the first time you're joining us, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy the episode. If you have any questions or comments or topic suggestions or anything like that, you can always email us on letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram actually only, at Let's Rage Together Podcast. We also have a website, letsragetogether.co.za, so actually just go there, everything is on there. And from there, you can also see links to our Patreon and PayPal if you'd like to support us financially, but also don't feel pressured. If you could even just tell your friends, share it, spread the word, that'll be awesome. So today we are discussing whether or not it's worthwhile to support and promote any and all animal rights activists just because they're vegan, in it for the animals.
But before we get to the main topic, we have some listener questions which were sent to us by Angelique. So thanks for that, Angelique. And the first question that Angelique asked is, I know it's wrong when people wear traditional outfits of other cultures like Red Indians, etc. What I would like to know is it still frowned upon if one would cosplay Mulan, for instance, seeing as she is Chinese and wears traditional clothing? It's a very good question.
Yeah, good question, Angelique.
What would you say to that, Pete?
I'm just going to cut to the chase and say that I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong to dress up as any other culture that isn't yours, to be honest. I don't think it's appropriate to do that kind of thing, and I think it could potentially be seen as offensive. We've spoken about this in previous episodes as well, but I think the main issue is that you are making a costume of someone else's lived reality. You know, so you can take the costume on and off, but they can't take theirs on and off. So like we mentioned, Latino or Mexican people might be offended if you dress up as them because of the current culture that they are experiencing in the US with Trump leading. You know, so there's no way that you could understand the experience, and I think that it's wrong to kind of use their stereotype as fun, as entertainment. So in that same way, Mulan is associated, I'm assuming, with Chinese culture, like Angelique said. Just like she said, when people dress up as what they call Red Indians, it's making fun of Native Americans who had literal like genocide committed on them. So yeah, in my opinion, it's wrong. I don't know what you think, T.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what you've said. I think the main issue, which you have mentioned already, is that when the costume that you are thinking of putting on in any situation has some element of a racial or cultural identity, I don't think that that's appropriate then. So, for example, if you are going to dress as Batman, that's totally fine because the fictional character is a fictional character and the batness of that character is the whole point of the character. If in most comics and movies and whatever, Batman happened to be played by a person of color, for example, you would not take that to mean that part of the costume means that you should dress as that person of color within that costume. So say it's a black guy playing Batman, you would not put on a Batman suit and then put on blackface, you know, like paint your face dark brown.
Yeah. Please don't ever wear blackface.
Yeah, you're not going to do that. So because that's not part of the actual identity of that superhero or whatever character it may be. And if you were to do that, that would be obviously very racist. And it's because you're focusing on the racial identity of that person and not just focusing on the character. So I agree with what you're saying, Pete, in that if part of that costume in any way represents a cultural element. I think if it's not your culture, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, just leave it alone and do something else.
Yeah.
And it's funny how when we were discussing this, that you said, like, for example, a person of color dressing up as Batman doesn't paint their face white to try to be a white man.
Exactly,
You know?
because the racial identity of that sort of character has nothing to do with the qualities of the character itself.
Yeah.
And a character like Mulan, you would necessarily have to have those elements of culture that alludes to a specific cultural and racial identity, which, yeah, I don't think you should ever do that. So stick to Batman.
And actually, Angelique, we looked up racism within cosplay, and there have been quite a few people of color who do cosplay who have had issues because they will, for example, play some character, and then they've had fans and other cosplayers say, oh, you can't play that character, that character's white.
Yeah, I think basically if you can't remove the racial identity from the character, then you shouldn't be wearing that character if you're not part of that racial identity. So, yeah.
Taryn said all the things much better than me.
No. In a nutshell, rather just stick to like a totally fictional character that has no racial or cultural identity that is not yours.
Yeah, and the bats won't be offended.
Exactly.
So her next question was, I just wanted to find out, why would sharing facts about veganism not be a good form of activism? I'm still finding my way around vegan activism, and I just want to educate myself more as to the better ways of doing things.
So I think the reason, and you can correct us if this is not the case, Angelique, but I think the reason Angelique is asking this is to do with the discussion we had around sharing articles around the growth of veganism that are not necessarily accurate. So my response basically would be, it's not wrong at all to share facts about veganism. In fact, we should be sharing facts about veganism. But the key word there is fact. So the problem with what we were speaking about in a previous episode with sharing these stats of growth in veganism, yeah, they might in some cases be accurate, but the way that the headline is framed, or the way that the stats have been done, or the wording that's used could allude to the fact that there's this massive growth of veganism worldwide when actually they're just talking about the States in one area in one survey. So basically, it's not so much don't share facts about veganism, do share facts about veganism, but just make sure they're accurate. And when we talk about accurate, you also have to be wary of all the health facts specifically.
Yeah, especially health facts.
Because yes, there's a lot of research to back up a lot of the information that gets shared, but there are often exceptions. And I think a lot of vegans frame veganism as this cure-all health wonder miracle diet when firstly, it's not a diet. And secondly, they frame it as if, you know, you will not get cancer if you go vegan, or you will not have high blood pressure anymore if you go vegan, or, you know, that's just ridiculous, because there are vegans who can get sick. There are vegans who are overweight. There are vegans who are underweight. There are vegans with all sorts of conditions. And we just have to be sensitive to the fact that when we are sharing certain info, even if it's based in scientific evidence, sure, but don't make sweeping claims that can't be proven, basically, because the non-vegan who is skeptical and who is not wanting to really engage at a specific level is going to try and poke holes.
Yeah.
So if you're just sharing things indiscriminately, it's going to be easy for them to poke holes in it. So make sure what you're sharing is factual, basically.
Exactly. Like, how much does it undermine veganism if you share something that can easily be disproved with a Google search?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's that one that goes around comparing the protein content of broccoli and beef. But that might not be inaccurate. But like you said, the way it's framed is also important. No one is going to eat 6 heads of broccoli in one sitting.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what I
the
mean?
thing. It's explaining it. I mean, it's very clear if you read, you know, like for like, grams for grams, but the weight of animal flesh is much higher than broccoli. So you have to eat a lot of broccoli. So
Yeah, just make sure it's factual and not done in like a twisty way. So,
and I think if it has any kind of air of fad diet or anything like that, I would steer clear, because you get a lot of people saying, oh, but you'll lose weight if you go vegan. Firstly, bullshit. I've gained weight since going vegan because I eat all the vegan treats. So it's just inaccurate. Yes, you can lose weight if that is what you want to do. But firstly, the fact that we are framing that as the ultimate goal for humanity is a problem.
Yeah.
Being thin is not everything. It's fat shaming and gross to do that. And secondly, yes, maybe there is some science to show that like for like, typical Western diet compared to a typical vegan diet, like for like will have lower calories, lower cholesterol, lower all of this stuff. So technically it should be easier to lose weight if that's what you want to do. But these memes that are being shared are not saying that. They're just saying you'll lose weight if you go vegan. And that's just sounds like a fad diet.
Well, it's really problematic because they perpetuate the fat shaming, the disease shaming, and the food shaming.
Exactly.
That's so prevalent within veganism. Some vegans are fat. Some vegans get sick. Some vegans eat junk food. Just fucking deal with it.
Exactly. Rather focus on the facts like this food compared to this food is healthier for this scientific reason. But that's not to say that you're never going to get sick. That's not to say that you're going to lose weight and look like a supermodel tomorrow because you're vegan now. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Yeah. So, Angelique, share all the facts.
As long as they're facts.
As long as they're facts. Hopefully that was a helpful response. If not, mail us again and we'll elaborate more. Or get someone who knows what they're talking about to answer for us. Then there's a third question from Angelique, but it's actually really relevant to our main discussion today. So we'll address that in a little bit. But first,
It's time for the bad and the rad.
if you're new to the show, this segment is where we have a short discussion about a few things we think are either bad or rad that we are not likely to do a full episode on. So let us know if you have any comments on these though, and if you want us to discuss them further, we can do that. But Pete, do you have any bads or rads today?
I've been trying to be in a more positive mental space lately than I have been. And so have been listening and reading and watching more positive stuff. And I recently listened to the Rich Roll podcast episode with Colin O'Brady, who is the first human being in history to cross Antarctica successfully. Solo, unsupported and unaided. So that basically means he had no help from anyone, no food dropped off at any point, and the unaided part means he didn't have a cart or like anything to make him move faster than a human can walk.
That's amazing.
So he dragged this massive sled, 900 and something miles, across Antarctica with all of his food and all of his gear. Didn't even take spare underwear.
Kind of gross, but okay.
Yeah. But like he mentions, taking spare underwear means 100 grams less of food.
Sure.
So he had to be super precise. And you should listen to that episode. Also go to colinobrady.com where any of you can read more about him. But the part that really stuck out to me was that he did the crossing on a plant-based diet, which I think is incredible.
Go vegans.
So no one in history has done this before because previously it was thought impossible to carry enough calories to be able to do it. Wired magazine said it's impossible to cross Antarctica because you
and
can't.
If Wired magazine says that.
Okay, well, many people have thought it's impossible. So he did it on a plant-based diet. And I just think it's amazing that he did that because it kind of proves like if someone can be the first human being in history to cross Antarctica on a plant-based diet, it means that you can get enough protein and calories and everything on a plant-based diet. So just shut up and stop saying that you can't get enough, insert whatever, on a plant-based diet. It's ridiculous.
So Pete, are you going to create a meme that says, go vegan and you can cross the Antarctic unaided?
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
You will lose weight, you won't get any diseases or get sick, and you can cross Antarctica.
And you can eat 7,000 calories a day you'll be...
That's a good point. He ate about 7,000 calories a day and still lost a massive amount of weight.
Yes, I would love to be able to do that.
What? Eat 7,000? Well, while you're walking through Antarctica.
No, not walking through Antarctica. Just eat 7,000 calories a day.
And still lose weight.
Or just stay the same, but just give me 7,000 calories.
Yeah, so I just think it really speaks to the fact that if this guy can cross Antarctica on a vegan diet and be the first human being in history to do it, then I can live my life on a vegan diet. And so can you, perfectly healthy. And not only that, but you can push the limits of what is previously thought not humanly possible.
But that doesn't mean that if you go vegan, you're going to suddenly be like an ultra marathon runner or something.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you can.
Have you not seen the documentary coming out? What's it called?
What?
About the vegan athletes. Everybody knows if you go vegan, you're going to become a super athlete.
I mean, you can if you want, but you probably won't if
Okay.
you're not currently an athlete.
So, Taryn, maybe also start with a rad. Let's be positive.
Okay, my rad for today is a social media account / community project. I'm not really sure how to describe them, but it's called Vegan Ikasi, and it's run by, from what I saw from an article, someone named Shaiya Lutuli. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm sorry if I'm not. But Vegan Ikasi is essentially a movement that aims to increase awareness about the plant-based diet and healthy living in disadvantaged communities in South Africa.
Wow, that's awesome.
I think that's amazing because there's a lot of privileged white veganism all over the place, and it's cool to see a lot of this work being done in townships and disadvantaged communities. And yeah, I'm actually keen to chat to them a little bit more about what they do and how they go about it.
I also think a lot of the vegan messaging that comes out is really directed towards like privileged vegans.
Yeah, totally.
So the poor are largely left out.
Yeah, so if you haven't yet, check that out. They're on Facebook and Instagram, and I think they have a website as well. I can't remember the URL right now, but we'll link to it in the show notes. But check it out. Seems like a really cool initiative.
Yeah, so it's the Ikasi part is spelled Ekasi.
Yeah.
So vegan Ikasi.
Yeah. Do you have any other rads or bads, Pete?
So I'm going to stick with my posi kick that I'm on today and say
PMA.
Say PMA all day. So another rad. I have hundreds of bads, but I'm trying to be more positive.
I'm proud of you, Pete.
So I've recently got really into running and specifically trail running. I really love being in nature and the experience of it. I actually don't really enjoy the act of running per se, but like trail running adds this whole other element to it, and it feels like almost a different sport to me than just road running. So there's a race that I recently found out about. A lot of people will say I'm probably super late to the party to learn about it, but the Barkley Marathons. So basically the Barkley Marathons is an ultra marathon, which means over 42 kilometers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a marathon is 42 kilometers. So it's really worth looking up because it's super weird. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just a really strange thing, and it's one of the things I love about trail running. I hate the drinking culture of trail running, but the rest of it is cool, and this specifically just stuck out to me as this really underground, strange thing that everybody is really amped about for a number of reasons. So it's 160 kilometers, the full course.
Kilometers or miles?
Kilometers. So it's 100 miles. The race is limited to a 60-hour period, so a 60-hour cutoff, which sounds like way more than enough time. But actually very few people have ever finished it because it's so difficult. So the race is limited to 40 people. No one really knows how to enter. So requirements and times to submit an entry application are a closely guarded secret, and no details are advertised publicly. So one of the challenges of the race is figuring out how to enter the race. The people who want to run have to submit an essay of why they should be allowed to run. If they are accepted to run the race, they receive something called a letter of condolence. I guess because it's so difficult. When they arrive, the first-time runners have to bring a license plate from their state or country as part of their entrance fee.
Like a stolen one, do you think?
I don't know what
That'd be quite cool.
what they mean. And previous races that they've done have included stuff like a white shirt or a flannel shirt or socks as like an extra donation.
It's so weird.
For entry. So people who have finished the race, if they come back to race, they have to bring a packet of Camel cigarettes as part of their registration fee.
If they finish like within the time?
No, if they finished the race before, yeah.
Oh, okay.
They give race bib number 1 to the person deemed least likely to finish one lap. And it's called a human sacrifice. So once you figure out how to enter it and everything, on the race day, the race can start anytime from midnight to noon. With just 1 hour before the race, you'll know that it's happening by someone who blows a conch. And then the race itself only officially starts when the race director lights a cigarette. In addition to how difficult the course is, added to this, the competitors have to find somewhere between 9 and 14 books hidden around among the course while they are doing this race. So, and then they have to remove the page of the book corresponding to their race number, and they get a new race number each lap.
That's wild.
So it's super wild. It's 60 hours overall, and this race is so difficult that it's been started by over 1,000 people. It's only been finished successfully 18 times, ever.
Is this something that you'd actually want to do, Pete?
I just think it's really cool how weird and difficult they make it. Like, it's a really underground thing, no advertising. It's difficult to even enter. And I just really like how weird and kind of underground and cool it is to me. Maybe people think it's stupid, but I think it's pretty cool.
I think it's cool. I would never do it. But if you do, good luck.
I might do it one day. Might try it one day. I doubt I'll finish.
Go for it, Pete. I believe in you.
Thanks. T, any more bads and rads?
Okay, so you won't hear this because we cut it out. But but I just said, speaking of recent news, when we weren't speaking of recent news, so Pete has a new rad.
So this rad, from now on, all of us and everyone listening, good way to change the subject in any conversation. Just say, speaking of the thing that you were thinking of speaking about. So like, if the topic becomes boring or you don't want to talk about it, say someone's speaking about like food or something, can you be like, speaking of books, I actually read this other book recently.
I guarantee you, when people listen to this, they're going to be like, that's not even funny. But it was funny in the moment. Anyway.
So speaking of recent news, hey, turn.
Shush. Anyway, back to seriousness and podcast faces. You should see our podcast faces. They're really cool.
Not really.
That's why we're podcast hosts, because we're both really weird looking. Anyway.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, just me. Anyway. So I also have a bad today. And it is the abortion ban in Alabama.
Super shit.
I could honestly go on for so long about this and all the ways that it's a problem. But I really cannot believe that in 2019, we still have a bunch of white dudes deciding what happens to women's bodies.
I can't believe in 2019 there's anyone who's against abortion.
It's ridiculous. Like, it's such a disgusting display of patriarchy and privilege.
Honestly.
Like...
And so many of those men that pass the bill don't even understand the first thing about biology either.
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
do a Google search of some ridiculous quotes by some of these Republican idiots.
Yeah, and then just a trigger warning for sexual assault. But there's no exception for incest or rape.
Oh, that's intense.
And doctors performing abortions in the state can get up to 99 years imprisonment.
Wow.
So a doctor performing an abortion could get, or is seen as a worse criminal than a rapist, and could go to jail for a longer time than the actual rapist.
It's actually mind-blowing. I don't even know how to think about this.
It's disgusting.
No one, what do people think? No one enjoys getting an abortion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like it's a thing that people are encouraging. But abortion needs to be safe and free and legal.
Exactly. And I do think that there should definitely be counseling and support if a woman is thinking of undergoing an abortion, because it can be a very traumatic experience. And I think there should be a lot of support surrounding that decision to make sure that it is the right decision for that person. But you cannot just take that away from someone to like decide what a woman does with her body.
Yeah, exactly. If you're so against abortions, get a fucking vasectomy.
Yeah,
and leave
exactly.
women's bodies alone, honestly.
And it will affect mostly poor and black women.
Yeah, but also think of the exceptions, right? So it's enough of a good reason that if someone feels like they aren't ready in their life to have a child, to have an abortion. But what about people who are mentally handicapped who get pregnant? They have to carry out their pregnancy. What about children? Like...
Well, that's the thing, you know,
fucked.
like
it's
some
so
people,
fucked up.
like some people will argue, oh, but that baby that you killed could have become the next president, or, you know, cured cancer. And then you have situations where it's like, okay, but the 13-year-old girl who fell pregnant could have done those things too. But if she has to somehow care for a child when she's not ready, she probably will not reach those goals. So, you know, how about we care about the people that are living right now, the actual living humans?
It's so fucked up, especially like you said, incest is not even covered.
Yeah.
So a dad gets his daughter pregnant, who's 16, and she has to carry out her pregnancy. and
Yeah, it's
she'll
wild.
get legally punished if she gets that baby aborted. What the fuck?
And it has nothing to do with protecting babies. It's just controlling women's bodies, and it's going to disproportionately affect poor women because they are not going to be able to just fly somewhere else to get an abortion, and they won't have access to the same kind of healthcare as privileged people. So it's like, come on.
Also, why draw the line there? Why not ban masturbation?
Well, they say that as soon as the fetus becomes viable, and you can, I think they said that if you can detect a heartbeat, then it's illegal. So before that, so that's basically 6 weeks, which is before most women will even realize they're pregnant. So it's not helpful at all.
But this is what I'm saying, is their line is like arbitrary. Because what if your sperm is viable?
Yeah,
the
but
sperm
it
knows how
hasn't-
to swim.
Yeah, but
right?
it hasn't merged with an egg yet. So
Yeah, but so
they're
what?
saying there's a heartbeat, so it's definitely a viable life, you know?
But it could be a potential forming with an egg to become a heartbeat.
Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah,
that's
I
what
get
I'm saying.
you're
It's so fucking random.
Yeah.
I hate this so much. It's absolutely just mind-boggling how this is even happening.
Yeah. So I'm not going to even carry on about that. It's infuriating. If you don't think it's infuriating,
Stop listening to us.
or email us actually if you disagree, because I'll fight you. So any more rads or bads for you, Pete?
Many bads, but I don't really want to add more on, so I'm good.
We'll keep it posy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not keeping it posy, but you can keep it posy. I have one more that's kind of like a bad / rad
Yeah?
/ just really funny.
Okay.
So this is for everyone listening, for a good laugh. Recently, I was having a discussion with Pete.
Oh my god, what are you going to say?
And Pete, how old are you now? 28?
29.
29? Are you 29?
29.
Yes, you're 29. Pete, in his 29 years on this planet.
Almost 30 though. Like I'm just at 30.
Pete, in his almost 30 years of. You're not helping your own case here.
Okay.
Almost 30 years on this planet. Until a couple of weeks ago, thought that it was a real legit saying to say that I've been, and I quote,
Asshole. You're such an asshole.
in the walls.
Come on.
Pete thought this was a real saying. You know, like when you've been bumping into things and injuring yourself a lot, most people would say, sheesh, Pete, you've been in the wars, buddy. No.
I don't even know what to say, but fine. Actually, I'm going to tell this other
Pete
story about
thinks
you.
that if you
I'm gonna
have
get you
been
back.
clumsy, you have been in the walls. I mean, I know some idioms and sayings are a little bit out there, but how would your brain conceptualize that if you have been injuring yourself recently, that you have been inside the structural perimeter of your house?
That's not what it means. That's not what it means. I thought it was like in the walls, as in a wall that you smash into.
Okay.
Like you in the walls, as in like there's a brick wall.
It would
and
be
you-
like hitting the walls then or something, Pete. In the walls means inside
Yeah, like-
the walls.
No, I didn't think like that. And honestly, I've not used this phrase very often throughout my life. And no
Clearly,
one, and
or people don't love you because they're just like, okay, we're just going to let Pete be incorrect for life.
no one's ever corrected me. Or maybe it's how I say walls, that people are like, oh, it sounds like walls.
Yeah,
I'm
you
sure
don't really pronounce your L's.
Oh, yes. Is it just shit on Pete Day today? I'm trying to be positive and you're just grounding me hard.
It's just funny.
Okay, so I just wanted to also say a little story.
No, you
I was,
don't need to.
Yeah, I was chatting to Taryn a few weeks ago as well, and it was really cold.
Okay, I know what you're going to say. And
Okay.
I just want to clarify. I had a severe headache and I was cold and grumpy and tired.
You have also said this is a great thing. So, and people will say how intelligent you are. So let's see.
Okay, well, yeah.
Okay. So it was cold, and Taryn was like, yes, how cool would it be if you could take a sock and make it like a giant sock to put on your head to make your head warmer? And I was
think
like,
I said a glove, like a giant's
no,
glove.
you said a sock. You
But
said
I was
a giant
visualizing
sock.
like a fictional big giant.
So I was like, like a beanie.
It's
Taryn,
not even
Taryn
funny.
invented a beanie, basically.
Okay, at the
It's
time.
so Taryn forgot that beanies exist and invented a beanie by saying she wishes that a fictional being had a sock big enough to put on your head to make it warm. Well done, Tone. You invented the beanie. And I'm in the walls. Let's
Oh,
move on with
thank
the
you.
episode.
Okay, at least my thing
Brilliant.
was an actual invention.
Absolutely brilliant.
Just because it's not quite in the depths of winter, and I momentarily forgot about beanies. I had a momentary memory lapse, okay? I still was creative enough. How do you think the person who invented beanies did it?
They did not think, I wish a giant had a sock so that I could put it on my
They
head.
probably did, okay?
Did not.
They probably just read the BFG by Roald Dahl and were like, giants are amazing. I totally want to use one of their socks to put on my head because I'm really cold right now.
You are the only human being that has invented a beanie in such a way.
Anyway,
Well done.
okay. If you're listening to this and you want to disprove Pete, please email us and just say how intelligent I am for that invention. But also, if you have any other sayings like in the wars with an R that you have been getting incorrect for your whole life, please tell us because I will love to be.
It's really funny. There's a This American Life episode which is really funny about all of that.
Yeah.
You should check that out. You should get a Nobel Peace Prize for your invention, Taryn.
You know what? I think so too, Pete. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. Anyway, on to the main topic. Today we are asking the question, should we be promoting any and all animal rights activists? So does the work that someone does for animals justify promoting them, even if they say and do things that are problematic in terms of other social justice issues? So to start off, we're actually going to answer Angelique's last question because it was really relevant to this, because she's asking about a specific activist that we would like to chat about. Pete, do you want to read Angelique's question?
Sure. So Angelique says, I also wanted to ask, in one of the podcasts, Pete said that we shouldn't listen to Gary Yourofsky, and I was just wondering what he had done because I hadn't seen anything bad.
Okay, so I've heard a lot of activists say they don't know what the problem with Yourofsky is, and at one point I wasn't aware of what he had done or said. And I had seen his speech and I thought it was pretty logical and seemed to make a lot of people go vegan. And I think that's the impression a lot of people have. What a lot of people don't know is that he has said some incredibly problematic, sexist, violent, disgusting things that cannot be justified.
And that he has not apologized for or gone back on. So the positions he holds are extremely problematic. And I can't emphasize extremely enough there.
Yeah, and we'll explain in a bit why we think they are so problematic, although you should be able to figure it out yourself from what we're about to play. But I have also heard a lot of people say, yeah, but he said that stuff really long ago, like in 97 or something, whatever it was. That doesn't matter because he has not apologized, like Pete said.
He's just said, oh, I said that so long ago. And so many of his fans say, oh, he said that so long ago, as if time makes it better that he said a problematic shit he hasn't apologized for.
Yeah, and look, there should be room for people to say, oh, I said that long ago. I'm sorry, I was being a complete idiot. Like, I've changed my views. He has not said that.
No.
He basically re-explains the same point in as disgusting terms and pretends that's some kind of justification.
Yeah.
So...
But he is super confusing in all of his justifications already.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we can kind of break down what the problem is with him. Thankfully, he has retired as an activist or whatever, but we just wanted to mention it because there's still people sharing his content and we don't think that they should. So please stop sharing his content.
Just let him retire.
Exactly. Just forget about him.
Honestly.
And let's all do better. So we're going to include some clips from Gary Yourofsky himself now, mostly because neither of us wanted to repeat some of what he has said, but also we think his own words can illustrate the points that we are making. And in case anyone thinks we're being biased or exaggerating or whatever, you can just hear for yourself. And just a major, huge, big trigger warning. There's a lot of disturbing language, a lot of reference to sexual violence. So if you want to skip ahead, the clip that we're including is probably going to be about 4 minutes. So just skip ahead a few minutes if you'd rather not hear it, or if you know what we're talking about and you don't want to expose yourself to that.
Yeah, we'll leave, say, 2 seconds now for you to skip ahead.
Deep down, I truly hope that oppression, torture, and murder return to each uncaring human tenfold. I hope that sons accidentally shoot their fathers on hunting excursions, while carnivores suffer heart attacks that kill them slowly. Every woman ensconced in fur should endure a rape so vicious that it scars them forever, while every man entrenched in fur should suffer an anal raping so horrific that they become disemboweled. Every rodeo cowboy and matador should be gored to death, while circus abusers are trampled by elephants and mauled by tigers. And lastly, may irony shine its esoteric head in the form of animal researchers catching debilitating diseases and painfully withering away because research dollars that could have been used to treat them was wasted on the barbaric, unscientific practice of vivisection.
Okay, two things. Do you know when I made that statement? 1997. Okay, it's been 16 years and not one person has raped a woman in a fur coat because I wished it.
All right.
Okay, so let's not get into people taking my words that literally. It was my wish. It was my fantasy.
First, there's not one person on this planet, not even a rape victim, that is more anti-rape and anti-rapist than I am. Rape is the most evil act of violence that can ever be committed, which is why I wish it happens to evil people.
I hope rapists get raped. I hope child molesters get raped.
Rapists, murderers, and child molesters should be vivisected, executed, and dissected. I hope Nazis, KKK members, and domestic abusers get raped too. I honestly think every rapist should have his cock and balls sliced off with a cuticle remover while he's fully conscious. Then he should be forced to eat his severed genitals after they've been dipped in puke. After he takes the last bite, I personally want to be there to shove two 12-inch metal skewers through his eyeballs and then drag him into a room filled with 10,000 flies so he can be eaten alive.
And I want to clarify this too about my wishes. My wishes don't come true. It's a wish of mine. I'm not asking anybody to do this. I hope that evil things happen to evil people. I'm sorry, I just can't bring it in my heart to have any empathy and love for evil people. I hope Nazis get raped. I hope child molesters get raped. I hope rapists get raped. I hope murderers get raped. I hope people that do evil things have evil things happen to them. And that's the whole point of my essay.
Karmic rape retribution. When the rapists stop raping the animals, then I'll stop wishing or hoping that rapists get raped. Because when child molesters are convicted and imprisoned, everyone says something like this: I can't wait until Bubba gets a hold of him in prison. And don't you dare deny it. What do you think Bubba's gonna do when their paths cross? Counsel him about his troubled childhood? Or forcibly penetrate his asshole? And 1 in 4 women have been molested. Those are the stats. So I know most women dig what I have to say about rapists and how they should be vivisected, executed, and dissected. I said that Palestinians are the most psychotic group of people on the planet. I stand by that statement. But I want to clarify something essential. I'm a misanthrope, not a racist. As usual, I win. Checkmate. You lose. Fuck you.
Wow. I don't even know. It's so shocking to hear every single time.
I'm going to try and respond to this calmly.
It's fucking wild.
So, I think we need to acknowledge how completely deranged the way that he speaks sounds. He is so violent.
It's despicable and disgusting how he speaks. It's unacceptable.
So I'm going to start off by addressing like when people kind of try and find a justification for what he says. We have all felt, I'm talking about vegans and animal rights activists here, we've all felt, I'm sure, rage about what happens to animals in the animal agriculture and related industries.
For sure.
We've all felt like we wish people would understand the violence that is inflicted on animals, and we wish that people would somehow be punished for those actions when they're doing that knowingly and without any kind of remorse or anything like that. But there has to be a point where you realize as well that, firstly, most of us were at one point not vegan.
Yeah.
So all of these despicable things that he is so-called wishing upon people who do so-called evil things.
And fantasizing.
He is essentially wishing that that would have happened to all of us who at one point were not vegan.
Including him, right?
Including himself. Secondly, the kind of violence that he is expressing a desire for is just as violent as the violence that he is opposing. So he is saying what is happening to animals should happen to people as a form of justice, which to some people might seem logical. You're angry that this injustice is happening, we should do that to the same people. How does he think that is going to help animal liberation?
Yeah.
I really do wonder if he has experienced some horrific trauma the way that he speaks, and maybe has internalized a lot of anger or something, or maybe he's just seen too much animal agriculture footage or something. But this guy is not okay.
It really seems like something is wrong.
Really, like this kind of violent language is just completely disturbing. And I mean, I can understand the rage at seeing this stuff happen to animals, but what he is essentially saying, so when he talks about the rape of people who wear fur because of what happens to animals in the fur industry, he needs to realize that is the same thing that happens to animals. Well, not the same, but a similar thing. You know, animals in the dairy industry are also sexually violated, and in actually all of the meat industry and all of that, they are forcibly impregnated. So essentially, he is saying that by buying those products, you are complicit in those acts of sexual assault, and that should happen to you. So I would love...
Well, not only that should happen to you, that he wishes and fantasizes that it would.
And that it should scar you for life.
And that you should be disemboweled because it's so violent.
Yes. So what he is saying is that someone like me or you, who has once consumed dairy, should have been so violently raped that we'd be traumatized for life. How does he think that would somehow bring about justice or make us become animal rights activists?
Yeah.
It is such a disgusting, deranged way of thinking. And, you know, even if you can understand where that rage is coming from, you know, the people buying these products are so far removed from the process that you cannot just equate it to a perpetrator, you know, engaged in these kind of behaviors. You know, even if we put aside for a second how disgusting the kind of punishment he's explaining is, if we put that aside and we just call it punishment, when we look at how far removed people are from the process of killing and, you know, cutting up animals for their flesh, or, you know, skinning them for their fur or whatever, yeah, those are really horrific processes. But the end consumer is so removed that largely they are ignorant about it. And if they're educated in the right way, a lot of them will go vegan. Then when you go a step closer to the people who are actually doing those actions, a lot of them are exploited themselves. A lot of them have got into those jobs because they have to. And yes, some of them show no remorse. Some of them are just outright cruel. A lot of the time, because they have to, as a psychological way of coping, harden themselves, desensitize themselves, and become cruel to cope with what they are doing.
Yeah.
So what he is saying is, let's not actually acknowledge how messed up the system is. Let's just replicate it.
Yeah, on the people who perpetrate it. Even in some of his other videos, he alludes to killing slaughterhouse workers on behalf of animals. Just to show how fucked his logic is.
It is ridiculous, honestly.
Do you see how confusing and contradictory he is by saying, no one, even rape victims, is more against rape than I am. I hope these people get raped.
Exactly. So he's saying he's the most against. And I just want to pause for a second and say, the fact that he has the audacity to say that he is more opposed to rape than a rape victim is so disrespectful, so insensitive, so disgusting. And then for him to turn around and say, oh, 1 in 4 women are sexually assaulted, so I know that women dig what I'm saying about rapists. I'm sorry, but if he ever listens to this podcast, fuck you, Gary.
Yeah, fuck
honestly.
you, Gary Rofsky. Honestly, just let the dude disappear.
Yeah,
Seriously.
as a woman and as any human being, I'm sure, nobody digs what you're fucking saying.
Yeah.
I
idiot.
said I was going to be calm.
It's really hard. It's really hard to be calm, as I'm sure people who are listening will be shocked. I hope.
Yeah.
Look at, as well, moving on from the thousands of times he says rape and wants people to get raped and fantasizes
The way
about
he
it.
throws that word around makes me
It's
cringe.
So I feel sick listening to him. Then saying, this race is the worst race on earth. I'm not racist because I'm misanthropic.
Such illogical thinking.
I hate all people, therefore I'm not racist, but this one race is the worst.
Yeah.
That
And he
is
calls
fucking
them-
racist.
He calls them the most, what, psychotic? Psychopathic?
The most psychotic
The
people
most
on the face of the
psychotic.
earth.
So he's firstly being ableist. He is using the word incorrectly. And then saying, all people are shit, so I'm not racist, but these people are the most psychotic. Honestly.
Well, like, what? Where do you, what logic? I don't even understand how to understand what he's saying.
And speaking of logic, I think this is the problem with why so many people actually get swayed by him. He actually uses a lot of solid logic. Even the fact that he says, let's take away the disgusting language for a second, put that aside, even though we can't really put it aside. Just for now, let's put it aside. If you take away that disgusting language and look at just the logic, he is saying everyone who sees, for example, a child being in some way harmed, most of us would want to react immediately violently in defense of that child.
Yeah, I
Fair
think
point.
that's pretty reasonable.
Fair point. He does not understand how important language is and the impact of language. Even when he talks about, I'm not even going to repeat it, but just go look at his essay on his website if you want to about, I don't know what it was, but he was mentioning basically justifying how you would want to reform welfare or something like that and equating it to making child abuse better for the child in some small arbitrary way. The point is logical. Welfare reform for animals is like reforming other forms of social justice for animals in the sense that making a harm slightly less harmful is not addressing the root of the harm. If he framed it like that, it would make a lot of sense. But the violent, disgusting, just outright horrific language that he uses just takes away the impact of the logic that he could have. But he adds this whole dimension of making it okay to, I mean, the description of like what he would do to a rapist is just...
Like the cuticle remover thing.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even think of that? That's like past the most sick gore horror movie way of how I wouldn't even be able to think of what he thought of.
Yeah, and if anyone had to actually engage in that behavior who is somewhat of sound mind would be traumatized by their own actions if they had to actually carry that out. He is essentially advocating for people to dehumanize themselves in order to unleash this horrific violence on people who are complicit in a system that we have all been complicit in.
Yeah. I can't really understand how anyone supports this guy.
I don't get it. And I think the problem is that he does have a lot of solid logic in terms of his basic arguments about veganism. He just goes completely off the track too far. I mean, you know, we've spoken before about how we're not entirely opposed to violence, and we do believe that there is some point where violence may be necessary in defense of innocent victims. But he is not just talking about violence as a form of defense. He is talking about active, really deranged violence.
And wishes and fantasies, right?
Yes, and wishing people would be sexually assaulted in
Like-
any context is so disgusting.
And scarred for life, and the fact I can't get past that he used the word fantasy. It makes me feel sick.
And then to say, oh, don't accuse me of, you know, inciting violence or telling people they should go and rape women just because I wished that. So he's saying he's not encouraging anyone to do it, but he wishes it. If you wish for something to happen, it means that if it happens, you would be stoked.
Yeah.
Like, rad, my wish came true. Which means if women are attacked tomorrow who eat meat or consume dairy, he would be stoked.
Yeah, because it would fulfill his wish.
And his fantasy.
Oh,
Disgusting. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this guy anymore.
Absolutely disgusting, yeah. Can we just stop with Yurovsky, honestly?
Yeah, if you want to know any more of the stuff that he said or whatever, you can go to his website. There's so much problematic stuff on there.
Actually, we will post some links in the show notes. rather don't even give him one view on his site.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think any of us should have anything to do with him.
Yeah. But if you don't believe what we're saying or somehow disagree, then, look into it for yourself. But honestly, save your time, because there are way better people to be looking into.
But what do you think of people who say, look how many people he's made go vegan? He even arrogantly says he has influenced more people to go vegan than anyone.
The fact that people are generally not very good at critical thinking doesn't mean you should be proud of yourself if you've influenced them through your problematic ways.
Yeah.
Yes, he has recorded a speech which very arrogantly says the best speech you'll ever hear or something. But yeah, he might have made some solid logical points and it might have made some people go vegan. That's cool. But that doesn't excuse everything else you've done.
Exactly.
So I would rather promote someone who hasn't said all this problematic shit, who can make the same points. Because let's be honest here, we all know the answers to most of the common vegan questions. It is very easy and logical. Anyone who has an inclination towards public speaking could probably make a similar speech, probably make similar points, probably make people go vegan in similar ways if they are actively touring and doing speeches. He is not special. He is not the vegan savior.
Well, I would argue, how can you measure how many people you've made go vegan? You have absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
Then also, anyone who's gone vegan from watching his speech, right, would just need to probably hear the same logic from someone else, so they were already inclined towards going vegan anyway.
Yeah,
so it would be a matter of time before they watched someone else give a speech who doesn't talk about the disgusting shit we just heard and then go vegan out of that logic.
Yeah.
Also, the issue that I have is that he seems to be so focused to prove how against something he is that he takes it this extreme length to say, now you have to believe how against this thing I was because I was so graphically, violently against it.
But also, I'm sorry, like, just the logic of saying, he sounds like fucking Trump. I'm the most against whatever. I'm the smartest. I'm the whatever. But to say, I am the most against rape, I wish evil people would get raped.
Yeah, what the fuck? And
Case closed, really.
Exactly, it's idiot. And then I think that he thinks, like a lot of people, that I see this thing as kind of like 3 levels of what happens to animals is really bad. For some people, you can just describe what happens to animals and make an analogy to their dog and they'll go vegan. There are many vegans, many people who go vegan who don't even watch slaughterhouse footage.
I hadn't really seen footage before I went vegan.
Exactly.
It was just logic and like reasoning.
Exactly.
And then watched stuff after going vegan. You don't need graphic footage to go vegan.
Yeah. I think it helped me personally. But that's like the second level that I'm thinking of. So you hear what happens to animals. It's really bad. Maybe you need visuals to show you. Oh, wow, this is intense. Then go vegan. Now he takes it further than is necessary, because I personally believe we don't need to make analogies to violence on humans to show how bad it is on animals. It's bad enough as it is. It holds its own weight. It's really terrible itself. He thinks that you need to show people through this like extremely graphic violence and language. I still can't believe what we just heard. And that's the way that people are going to make the connection to go vegan. Also ignoring the fact that veganism is not perfect. Like non-vegans accurately point out but use badly in arguments, grains also kill animals with the harvesting of grains. The fact that most of our car tires have animal products, there's no way of escaping harm on animals. So he's using this veganism as the ultimate thing to strive towards and ignoring all grey and nuance of the world. Like you said, the plight of slaughterhouse workers and people who are forced to take jobs that no one wants. All of these grey areas are nuanced, like animals killed indirectly through grain harvesting, everything. There are just so many reasons why he's so problematic and his logic is so flawed and his language is so disgusting. And there's so many other activists that I think, what is anyone doing supporting him?
Yeah, and what's unfortunate is, like I said, he actually makes a lot of logical points. So I think a lot of people also think that you need to make some kind of human analogy or whatever to get through to the people who struggle to empathize even with other people, never mind other species. So if you can say, you know, if you can get to a point where you can get the person to visualize, wow, what if that was me? You know, what if it was my baby being taken away? Or what if I was locked in a cage? You know, you don't have to go so far as to say, you know what? You don't get this. You don't understand why veganism is important. So you know what? You still want to have dairy? I'm going to forcibly impregnate you, take away your baby, lock you in a crate so you can understand what it's like to be in a veal crate. That is just...
But what you said now is not even nearly on the same level of violence as he wants.
Yeah, but exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, yes, there is room to make people aware that animals can suffer in similar ways to us, and that if we were to empathize with them and visualize ourselves in those experiences, even if we don't really care about other species or even other people, for most people that should make them realize, okay, this situation is really shitty. You do not have to take them and replicate what is happening to the animal to drive the point home, because all you're going to do is traumatize them.
Yeah.
That's why I say, I don't know if this dude has been traumatized or what, but it's really unfortunate because he has the logical arguments and he understands it, but he's so full of rage and misguided thinking about revenge and justice and all of that, that I think something must have gone wrong in his life, or I don't know how you become like that.
No, it's wild. And I don't know how anyone can justify it by just saying, oh, but it's for the animals.
Exactly.
A really great term to look up, if anyone's wants to look things up, is the term restorative justice, which he does not understand.
Yeah, definitely not. Anyway, enough about him. That was probably way too much time to give to him anyway.
But if you aren't aware of our opinion by now, no, it's not worth supporting all animal rights activists.
Yeah. Okay, so you're just ending the debate right there.
Just spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler alert. The answer is no. Okay, then we thought we would just mention a couple of organizations, because we're not just talking about individual activists. So in terms of individual activists, I think we can agree that it's not worth supporting an individual even if they are really, really good and really, really logical in terms of speaking about veganism. If they are problematic outside of that, not to the point of being violent the way that Gary Yourofsky is, but even just making sexist comments or racist comments or being insensitive to other injustices, then we shouldn't really be promoting those people, because there are better people to be promoting. Yeah. And we have to acknowledge other social justice issues, and we have to acknowledge the experiences of other people in the vegan community if we want to have a strong movement. Because if we don't, we are going to marginalize those people. So in terms of individuals, I would say, you know, if their messaging is good, that's cool. But if you find out that they're doing some shitty things on the side of that, just stop supporting them. Stop sharing their stuff. It doesn't mean you have to go on this like hate spree for them, but, you know, call them out if you see it happening and support someone else. Yeah. It's that simple.
And what you said about marginalizing people in the movement, that makes the animal rights movement weaker, which is in the long term worse for the animals.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't argue that, oh, well, it's fine because it's for the animals, because actually it's worse for them.
Yeah. But I think we'll kind of come back to that, but we just wanted to also discuss supporting organizations and groups. So I think our view is pretty similar, that we shouldn't just support an organization just because they're a vegan organization. Yeah. We have to be as critical of organizations and groups as we are of individuals, which is sometimes harder, especially when you get like international organizations with separate chapters and groups all over the world or all over a country. It's less likely that you would be able to know what's going on in all of those regions and to know if there's problematic stuff happening in one area and not another. So I guess it's hard to make judgments sometimes about an entire organization, but we thought we'd just discuss some kinds of organizations that may be problematic in some situations. So, for example, DXE, Direct Action Everywhere. Pete, what would you say your views are on DXE?
Well, DXE, just like some other animal rights organizations, have leaders or leadership who have had, for example, sexual assault charges lodged against them, that then, because to the people in the movement or the group or organization, the name and organization is so important to them, more so than the movement of animal rights, they cover it up. People cover up things, they make excuses for people, they won't acknowledge that someone has had charges put against them, so maybe let's halt our support for now until we know what's going on. It just carries on and they make excuses. So that's one sign. But if there are problematic things happening in the organization And members of the organization try to cover it up because to them the organization is more important than the movement. That is a warning sign for me.
Yeah, that's huge red flags.
So also one of my favorite thinkers, and yours too, Carol J. Adams, who wrote The Sexual Politics of Meat. She even refuses to speak at events where direct action everywhere are present because she doesn't want to be the reason why someone comes to an event and then because they're vulnerable be recruited for direct action everywhere, because she actually accuses them of operating like a cult. You can go to caroljadams.com, and on her blog she has a blog post explicitly saying why she won't speak at events where DXE is present.
I think that's quite a powerful move on her part to verbally object to speaking in the same place as them. And I think we'll go a little bit more into why some of what they do is problematic, aside from like the allegations against some of the members. But I also kind of think that if I was in her position, I probably would speak at the event.
Okay.
Because her ideas are really, really important. And if she doesn't go there, she's silencing herself. So there will still be people going, listening to DXE and other activists and getting influenced by them with no counter argument present. So if I was her, I understand what she's saying and just not being there. In case someone goes there specifically to see her and then is influenced by them, I would also look at it from the counter side, the people going there to see them seeing her.
Might be influenced by her.
Yes,
Yeah,
and that's a key opportunity to just take the beginning of your speech to verbally say, I'm here, but I'm vehemently opposed to what DXE stands for X, Y, and Z reasons, and then do her talk. And I think that would be really powerful as well.
I like that you said the intro, because I was going to say she's specifically referring to vulnerable people because she thinks of direct action everywhere as operating like a cult.
Yeah.
So she's specifically nervous of someone who's maybe not that secure in themselves getting like roped into this thing. And on her blog, she has this whole list of reasons why she thinks it's operating like a cult. So I like that you said that in her intro, she could say, just for everyone present, direct action everywhere is problematic. This is why I think so. Please don't go to their table and please don't join the organization. This is why. Here's my talk.
Yeah, and I guess it is hard, you know, when you mention vulnerable people, because there are a lot of people who don't like to be outspoken or go against the grain, and being vegan is already quite difficult in a lot of social settings where you have to be the kind of weird one, the outspoken one, the one who's making everything difficult. And, you know, that's an uncomfortable space for a lot of people to be in. So I can understand that with an organization like DXE, there's that sense of belonging and security and kind of power in numbers, you know. So I think even if Carol Adams was speaking and said that, there might still be people who don't listen to her and just go listen to DXE anyway, because listening to a thinker like Carol Adams will require you to think outside of the mainstream and probably also be uncomfortable for a vulnerable person like that.
Yeah.
But I personally would still think it's worth it. It's worth even saying, if you're feeling alone or awkward and you're looking for a group to join or whatever, and you're not sure and you were thinking of joining DXE, come and speak to me afterwards and I'll help you find other ways to be active, you know? I think that would be a key opportunity.
Yeah, that's a solid point. I agree with you. But what do you think, though, like besides for all of this stuff, I actually think that DXE's, even their tactics are problematic.
Yeah, so I think that there is room for some direct action similar to what they do, going in and rescuing animals and stuff, but it's such a nuanced...
Well, they do open rescues now, but most of the activism seems like, to most people, I think, if you look at the YouTube, just going into restaurants and like screaming at people.
Yeah, but I was going to say even like the open rescues, or the, not necessarily open rescues, but rescues, I always find myself asking, how much have they thought it through? Do they have proper sanctuaries for the animals? And I'm sure they would say that they do, but I feel like it creates this environment of high adrenaline, high sense of belonging, where people are just amped to feel like they're doing something. And the risk involved in like breaking laws to rescue maybe 2 animals, if you end up in jail because you didn't plan that properly, because you were just amped, is really not worth. I mean, for those individual animals, sure, it's worth it for them. But you can either save those 2 animals or work on something much more constructive and possibly save, hypothetically, a lot more animals than just 2.
Well, many of the Animal Liberation Front's actions have been super effective, you know, like with their arsons, with their rescues of animals where they have planned it out. But like you're saying, if it's just this like adrenaline-fueled catharsis thing, then it's kind of reckless.
And they go in public in big numbers, which means you cannot guarantee that all of the people joining you are legit and they're all like, you know, they all understand the laws, they all understand the legal implications, they understand the necessity for proper planning and for not telling people what you're going to do, you know. I would feel wary involving so many people who are just super passionate to do something, and it's, you know, fueled by that. It's almost like that early vegan rage where you're just like, I'm going to save all the animals, you know, but you're not really thinking clearly.
But I mean,
so there's room for proper planning, like you say, like proper.
Like we are, don't get us wrong, like we are fully behind hardcore direct action. The effective direct actions, people plan stuff for like 6 months to a year. And then if there's one thing that goes slightly off or wrong, cool, back to planning.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's not like, let's just rush in, like unthinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I do think, like you mentioned, going into restaurants and shouting and screaming, even these like pour blood all over yourself, lock yourself in a cage in public. I follow a lot of activists, and it's kind of a personal rule that I don't unfollow them, even if they're like problematic or start to annoy the shit out of me, because I want to see what they're doing and I want to see what these organizations are doing so that I'm aware of what's going on and aware of the problematic stuff that might be being said, so that if someone asks me, you know, oh, what do you think about this organization? I know what they're doing and I know why I'm opposed to it, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I've seen so many people that I follow getting involved in these DXE things, and it's just so dramatic, and they'll cry and say, oh, I've really felt so connected to the animal experience being locked in a cage, and, you know, I know it's not even remotely close to what the animals go through, but I really felt it. And it just seems like such a theatrical, it seems like such self-flagellation a lot of the time. And I can just imagine that like 90% of people that are non-vegans seeing this are going to be like, what a joke.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when we are going to realize that it's such an important part of having a healthy, strong activist community to not constantly have this mindset of, I can't be happy, I must self-flagellate, I hate myself, I must be punished. Kind of like I must constantly, you know, expose myself to pain and suffering.
To feel like I'm one with the animals
just
or something.
Stop, it's such a harmful mindset.
Yeah, exactly. But aside from that, just making these big spectacles. And I think, again, if there's something really dramatic and well-planned and very visual, if you do a campaign in the right way, I think it can really get through to a lot of people.
Yeah. But it needs to be
seems
clever.
like it just ends up, for most of these events, being this thrown together joke of let's throw blood on ourselves, or let's, you know, sit in cages for 3 hours, and people are just walking past like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I find that it's actually quite insulting to the experience of animals, because you're almost making a theatrical joke.
I agree.
Which doesn't sit well with me. Typical pizza thing, sitting in cellophane, covered in blood, half naked, you know, looking like a so-called piece of meat. Come on.
And actually, most of the time, PETA's campaigns like that are sexist.
Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, then you are trading one form of exploitation for another. And it's just ridiculous. That's not effective. So I think there's many warning signs within an organization like DXE to look out for in other organizations, you know. They also have very confusing messaging. They aren't always consistently vegan. The leader of DXE wrote a paper called Boycott Veganism. Yeah. Which I've read it, and it's super weird and confusing. So what are they actually doing? You know?
Well, they just want to make activists.
Yeah, that's their thing, right? They want to make activists. But
activists doing what? Going and shouting at people at restaurants, and people just get annoyed.
It's not an effective.
It's not effective at all. How many of those people are going to go vegan? Zero.
But like we mentioned, Carol Adams, she says, you know, especially over food, it's the worst time to try and do outreach.
You're literally giving them a reason to defend what they're doing.
Yeah, because what does she say? You know, the flesh in front of them, they consume like they consume you shouting at them.
Yeah, it becomes a form of entertainment for them.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just for YouTube to make videos that you can get hits on, and it's this cathartic experience for the activists.
But also just logically, anyone engaging in any behavior that you're asking them to change is going to be defensive. If someone is lighting a cigarette in front of you and you say, you know, that's bad for your health, they're going to get annoyed. because they just want to smoke their cigarette.
Yeah.
It's not helpful to criticize someone's behavior while they're doing that behavior, because it makes them defend that behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also just another point on DXE, when we spoke about vulnerable people and the kind of culty feeling of it, I think that for vegans who are keen to get into activism, you need to be really careful about your own mental health and your own reasons for doing what you're doing. If you are doing activism because you're finally meeting people who understand your worldview, I mean, everybody wants to feel like they belong, everyone wants to feel understood. But if that's your reason for doing activism, to just go meet other vegans or to feel validated in some way and to get that rush of like, yes, we just helped so many animals, we made a difference. Why? Because you got stared at and laughed at and mocked, and you know, you annoyed people, and people, you know, you got together in this angry mob shouting at people in a restaurant. I mean, it's like mob mentality. You're going in there and everyone's excited because they're like, yeah, we're making a difference. Is it mob mentality, or are you making a difference? Probably just mob mentality.
And at the end, you reinforce each other because you went through that experience together, you know.
Yeah.
And I think a warning sign is that a lot of activists in groups like DXE, you know, there's a big overlap of the kind of big three at the moment, like DXE, Save AV, Anonymous for the Voiceless. That often the organization seems more important than the cause.
Yeah.
Which is a problem.
Yeah. We're not in any way assuming that we know the best form of activism or the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things. We're just kind of discussing what we have experienced and what we think. But if you yourself are thinking of engaging in a type of activism, I think the important thing is just to say, what is my motivation for doing this, and what is the impact? And how do I know that that impact is a positive one and not a negative one? And
do I need to do this under the brand and name of an international organization, or can I just do this myself? Because nothing that any of these organizations are doing is new. This is like all activism that has been happening for decades. That suddenly it's now been rebranded and you can buy a t-shirt and you can join a group. It's not new.
Yeah, and this was something that we kind of debated at the Cape Town Animal Rights Conference last year. That, you know, people were talking about being excited that organizations like DXE were thinking of starting up here, you know, and we kind of made the point that why do you want to do that? An international organization is not necessarily going to work in the same way somewhere else. Context. You don't need to use that umbrella. There's already problematic shit happening within that organization. Why do you need them? I mean, it's nice to feel like you're part of something bigger where there's support and structure and all of that, but you can also just learn from it and adapt it to where you are, clean slate, no bullshit, and do things with your own input and your own critical thinking.
And you don't have to report back to anybody.
Exactly. And if you're just transferring the current structure of an organization over somewhere else, you're not very likely to question that structure.
Yeah.
Or to relook at, do we need this element or do we not? You're just going to lump the whole thing together and translate it here and be like, okay, cool, we have a chapter here.
Also hope that geographically and racially and in every way it makes contextual sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also mentioned another big group that everyone is really excited about at the moment called Anonymous for the Voiceless. Taryn was actually an organizer, the Africa regional organizer for Anonymous for the Voiceless, right?
Yeah, for a while. So I was an organizer for a long time, and then for a short time, the Africa regional organizer. So I understand how the organization works. And I do think that there is some benefit to the structure of the activism that's done by AV. And that's why I was part of it. And it's kind of how I got into street activism. So I think there's value in how they go about what they do. But I left a while ago for a number of reasons, one of which was, firstly, there was a lot of things that I didn't really agree with, like the use of the specific kind of masks, or even questioning why the masks were there.
Or the music, right?
Yeah, like very inflexible, like you must use this, you must do this structure. And I kind of understood that, you know, certain rules were in place to keep the structure uniform under that brand. And I can understand that, you know, wanting to be kind of uniform worldwide and make sure things run smoothly and all of that. But there were also a lot of issues with the organization itself. So I'm just going to divulge a whole lot of shit here from when I was an organizer. But basically, one issue that I always had from the start was, which didn't actually affect me, which is why I kind of put up with it, I guess, is that, for example, the merchandise. If you see any photos of any chapter anywhere in the world, you'll see everyone wearing AV shirts and hoodies and stuff. And
Terrible logo, by the way, in my opinion.
yeah, it's not great. But anyway, people wearing all of this gear. So for the South African chapters, we could print our own stuff here as organizers. And the way that I used to run it was, cool, I'm going to print this merch for everyone, make a little bit of profit off of that and use that to print flyers and buy the speaker, buy the whatever, and kind of it would fund itself and that would be cool. And, you know, if we had any extra money, we would help out other local chapters or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. That seemed to make sense to me. What doesn't make sense is that every other chapter, the rule is you have to order merch from the main website.
Yeah.
And that is bullshit because they've got these chapters all over the world.
650 of them, as far as I know.
Something like that. All these organizers giving voluntary time, forking out the initial cash to print the boards and the pamphlets and all of that stuff, just as volunteers, you know, which is fine if people want to do that. But then when you've got this, essentially they've also registered a company, which was supposed to be a non-profit, and they made some excuse that, you know, they didn't know what they were doing and they kind of almost accidentally, it sounds like, registered a company. Bullshit.
Yeah, absolute bullshit.
So now they have this company and all these chapters from all over the world have to order merchandise from their website. So these activists are working their butts off to get these chapters going, putting in their own investments and stuff. And then they would turn around and say, yeah, you should have a donation tin at your site and your volunteers can contribute as well. And I was like, sorry, now I'm going to ask volunteers to pay to volunteer. Come on.
This is also a thing I wanted to point out was the term is confusing. They keep referring to themselves as an organization, and it makes it sound like this. That's the right term to use for activists. It's an organization when they are just a private business. Yeah.
So all of these chapters all over the world are ordering their merch from the online store, going directly to them. And when I was an organizer, none of that money was coming to any of the chapters to buy TVs or anything like that. So everything was volunteer funded. And that never really sat well with me at all because I was like, where's all this money going? Then suddenly, you know, the founders are doing a world tour from a secret sponsor who is rumored to actually be Yorovsky. So that's another whole fucking story. But also traveling around the world to help people set up chapters. And I'm thinking, okay, everyone around the world has set up their own chapter. There are activists all over the world. No one is so incompetent that they need someone from the other end of the world to come and help them set up a chapter, as if these two people that run this organization
from Australia
think they know how to set up a chapter on the other end of the world and understand the cultural norms and standards over there and help activists to do activism in their own country.
Also, what would they not be able to achieve over a Skype call in the same way?
Exactly.
They just went on a holiday.
And there's a manual.
They just went on a holiday.
To their credit, they do say from the beginning, if you like the model of activism, you feel free to use the manual, use the structure, change whatever you want, but just don't use the name. So to their credit, that's cool that they encourage people to do that. But the thing is, people don't do that.
Well,
so
yeah, the problem there I have as well is that they're kind of like giving you permission when they did not invent this form of activism.
Sure, but I don't think it's so much giving permission as saying when people criticize them, well, like, you're welcome to do it.
Oh, okay.
And they're even saying you can use our manual, you can use everything, you can copy it to the T if you want to, just under a different branding, you know, if you're going to differ.
Because of what, like copyright infringement or something?
I don't know. So to their credit, I mean, it's cool that they're not saying like you must be part of AV or nothing, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, people feel the sense of international community, and it seems like it's becoming this organization where it's, oh, I got to be part of AV. AV is like the organization.
Also, that it's the most effective form. And I mean, I think here maybe we should direct people to Jake, the Cranky Vegan.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out the Cranky Vegan, super good criticisms of a lot of this sort of stuff. He makes a lot of logical sense. He's probably a lot calmer than us, even though he calls himself the Cranky Vegan. I think he's pretty calm.
I think people probably think we're much crankier than he is, actually.
Yeah. We're quite nice, though. I mean,
yeah, but I mean, some stuff makes us angry, though, and it's justified, I think. But
yeah, but I promise we're actually nice. I think I've said that before, but I don't know if people believe us. But anyway. But yeah, check out Cranky Vegan. He's got a lot of like good commentary on a lot of this stuff. Yeah, I'm really glad that I'm not involved with AV anymore. And another reason that I kind of left was that we're going to include another little clip now, and we're just dropping names because we don't give a shit.
Yeah.
So
we don't need friends.
Come at me, bro. Anyway, so George Martin, who some of you might be familiar
The
with
singer.
because he's... That is his name, right? George
Yeah,
Martin.
yeah, I'm joking.
Is there a singer, George Martin? Isn't it George Michael?
Oh, maybe.
Pete knows pop music. So George Martin is one of the London organizers. And there was basically this controversy about AV and them starting a company and their hierarchical structure, which is a whole other issue, and all of these things. And they did a 24-hour cube in Berlin where Paul and Asal, the founders, said some problematic stuff about basically that instead of testing on animals, they should test on pedophiles. And at the time, they thought that pedophiles meant convicted child molesters.
But also any guilty criminals.
Yeah, but they admitted afterwards that they thought pedophiles meant guilty child molesters. So they said that if they had to choose in a hypothetical between testing on animals or testing on criminals, they would choose criminals. So obviously they're not even questioning the justice system or the problems with prisons or anything like that.
Human rights issues or anything.
Yeah, so basically they got called out on all of that justifiably, and then they made there was that group, I don't know what they were called.
I'm not 100% sure, but we'll post links.
Truth of Cube or something.
Yeah, we'll
Kinda
post
weird.
links to these videos in the show notes.
Yeah, so they posted a bunch of issues with AV. AV then responded, in my opinion, in a very weak way.
Yeah, I think they would have a better standing if they actually didn't even make the response.
Yeah, they should have just ignored it. But a lot of people don't know that any of this stuff even happened. And a lot of people still ask me why I left AV or whatever. So here you go, peeps. If you ask me, this is why. So back to George Martin. He was in this video clip, and we'll play the audio now, where he basically said some problematic stuff. And Paul, the founder of AV, said, yeah, man, for sure. So we're just going to play that now so you can hear for yourself.
I want feminists marching alongside men's rights activists, marching alongside Green Party supporters, marching alongside Trump supporters for the animals at animal rights marches. That's an inclusive movement. And if you're shutting people out of the movement because they don't have a certain, the same political ideology as you, that's not building an inclusive movement.
Yeah, totally, man.
So,
well, men's rights is nothing.
yes.
I just have to say that. But what is a men's rights activist? Not like it's someone who just sits on their couch. I don't understand what that is.
Yeah. So anyway, this is really problematic for me. For George Martin to say this and for Paul to be like, yeah, man, for sure. To say that an inclusive movement means including people like Trump supporters or men's rights activists, you are completely invalidating the experience of other people. Now, in response to some of this, they also drew up a document in terms of not their mission statement, but their like kind of ethical guidelines, saying that they have zero tolerance for discrimination. So they've stated that if there's like sexual assault allegations or any accusations of racism or anything like that, that there would be zero tolerance and the person would be asked to leave the organization. To their credit, that's good. They say they've investigated some cases of that already. That's cool in theory. But then you have George Martin saying, let's embrace the Trump supporters and the climate change deniers, you know.
And the racists and the right-wing people.
Yeah, so now you're saying that you have zero tolerance for this, but you're expecting women who may be victims of sexual violence to march alongside men's rights supporters who probably don't care what has happened.
Or they think feminism is a joke.
Exactly. Or Trump supporters who are fine with being anti-immigration and outright racist to march alongside people of color. That is not inclusive. That is marginalizing those people.
It's twisted centrist politics. That's
exactly
what's happening here.
So that doesn't sit well with me at all. So
it's like we said earlier, you cannot have a healthy movement and in the long run an effective movement for the animals by including everybody if you are including people whose inclusion does not include some people.
Yeah, their
Do you know what I
inclusion
mean?
is violating the rights of other people.
Their idea of including people does not include others. So it's like in the last episode when we interviewed Aragon, he pointed out how, it's right to deplatform Nazis from speaking. It's right to deplatform Richard Spencer from talking at universities because his idea of freedom, so he wants freedom of speech, but his freedom doesn't include black people, for example. So how would you have a Trump supporter marching alongside an environmentalist or a feminist marching alongside a men's rights activist when, like you said, that person's very existence is invalidated?
Yeah.
Like, how could you expect a Jewish person or a person of color to march alongside a Nazi because they are fucking vegan Nazis. As ridiculous as that sounds, they are far right vegans who think that these people should die. Do you know what I mean? So how the fuck is it an inclusive movement to include everyone like that? It's not. It's the opposite of that.
Yeah. So just to kind of come back to, let's not completely slate everyone because we're trying to be positive today.
Yeah.
But I can understand why AV still appeals to people. And my thinking when I was an organizer was basically that each chapter was very much run independently, but according to a certain set of guidelines or whatever. So I always tried my best to run the events as inclusively as possible, and I made it very clear that there was no space for any kind of discrimination and things like that. But the problem is when you get associated with a name, anything that happens anywhere in that organization becomes associated with that name. And it started to become very uncomfortable to be associated with a name that did not sit well with me. So,
especially as a feminist yourself.
Exactly. So I can understand why it appeals to people, because they firstly don't know a lot of the stuff has gone on, but they also just want to be a part of something, and they see the photos and they see that it's worldwide and they think like, oh, these people are heroes, you know, this is so great. You're out there on the streets, you're making such a big impact. Okay, but there are other ways. There are other organizations, or just start your own group. Just do something. You don't need to be part of some big name to make a difference. Even if you feel like you need that kind of support, there are other ways to find support. Meet other vegans and start something small. It doesn't have to be this big flashy thing to make an impact. And quite frankly, it doesn't really make an impact if it's problematic.
Yeah, just because it has great logos and marketing and everything. And for those who don't know
or average logos and good marketing.
Yeah. For those who don't know how it works, though, the idea is to make a kind of spectacle by wearing these masks. For some reason, Guy Fawkes V for Vendetta masks, I don't know why they ever chose that, but there's some reason, that attracts people to this kind of cube that people stand in holding screens, and then signs that say truth on them. And the screens have slaughterhouse footage. And then there are people who do outreach that speak to anyone who comes by who's interested. So just so you know how it works, it's like a classic street outreach. But like I said again, like this is not new. I mean, people have been doing this for 40 years. AV is only like 3 years old, 4 years old. It's not a new thing. They don't own it. So if you want to go and do street outreach and talk to people, just go do it.
Yeah.
There's no one stopping anyone from getting a screen, getting footage, make a spectacle to attract people and talk to people about veganism.
Yeah. If that's what you want to do, you can do it without being affiliated to anything.
Exactly.
And you know what? If you want to be part of AV, that's cool. But again, question why? Why AV? Why DXE? What is your motivation for wanting to join that group, and what impact is that group having or not having? You know, is it just the sense of the community that you're after? Because I'm still part of a lot of the groups, then I see what conversations go on, and people are so excited, especially new vegans, like, oh, I've been wanting to join this group for so long, and there's so much unquestioning ampedness that's quite frankly scares me, because I also don't even want to know what kind of outreach is being done.
Yeah. I just wanted to make one more point, is just that people have this idea of, as long as it's for the animals, everything else is excusable. And I think it's such a dangerous perspective, and it's such a dangerous opinion to have, because then you do get like Nazi vegans included in things, and that's going to create really unhealthy communities and activist groups, you know. And Yorovsky does this, DXE does this, AV does this, where they're like, veganism is about the animals and for animals only.
Yeah.
And we should focus on animals only. And there's also this underlying point, sometimes not even underlying, sometimes explicit, that if we talk about speciesism, all other forms of discrimination will magically vanish. If everybody goes vegan, there won't be any more racism or sexual assault or anything like that. Absolute bullshit. Patriarchy is just as bad of a thing to focus on. Anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-homophobia, trans rights. All of these things are important. Go check out the thinker and activist Steve Best on his theory of total liberation to find out why you cannot achieve animal liberation without also eradicating poverty, for example. All of these things are interconnected, and it's really important to have them all interconnected. Asal from AV directly says you are taking veganism away from animals when you include other issues.
Yeah,
What does
so
that
they
mean?
basically say they have zero tolerance for discrimination, but please can we just focus on the animals because this is the only cause they have. There are people fighting for other kinds of injustice everywhere, so there's a lot of support for other causes. Let's just give the animals this. But what they're failing to recognize is that it's all interlinked so much that if you are fighting against speciesism, you are fighting against a system of domination and oppression that filters into other social justice movements as well. And yes, it is really frustrating that you have environmentalists and feminists and anti-racism activists fighting passionately for all these things and not making the connection to veganism. Yes, that's really frustrating, but it's not a good way to go about it by saying, well, you have your cause, we have ours. Because if we don't work together, we're not going to get anywhere. Even if other activists aren't understanding animal rights, it's fine.
Yeah.
You have to still try and understand as much about oppression as possible if you want to get to that endpoint. And I think the thinking behind, oh, if everyone goes vegan, we'll have a peaceful world and there will be no other discrimination, because I think people frame it as the initial kind of conditioning to domination, where when you're a child, you're given animal products and you're basically taught that kind of disconnect where some animals we love, some animals we use and we exploit and we eat and all of those things. So I agree with that it's probably the most, or one of the most entrenched forms of oppression. So theoretically, if we could tackle that, we should be able to tackle that way of thinking in other areas of justice. But what I think people who are advocating that message for are oversimplifying is that there are a lot of vegans who understand animal rights, who don't understand the mode of domination and oppression that occurs in speciesism. They might understand the term speciesism, but they're not realizing that, yes, we have to fight speciesism. What does that mean? We have to fight the modes of domination, and they're not necessarily critically analyzing the ways of thinking and the behavior that leads to speciesism. So they're trying to just tackle speciesism, fight for animal rights, and that's where it stops. But if you don't go that step further and say what kind of thinking creates this environment, then you will not have a peaceful world, because it's that kind of thinking that filters into patriarchy and racism and all of those other kinds of oppression. And people are just saying, let's just make the connection to the idea that animals matter, and then the world will be peaceful.
It's ridiculous.
Bullshit.
Yeah, absolute bullshit.
We have to make that connection, yes.
Yeah.
But we also have to make the connection as to why we have overlooked that. And we've overlooked that because of the way of thinking of speciesism, which is the same mode of thinking of all oppression.
Well, AV themselves have said that the HR team has investigated charges of sexual assault. Look at DXC, sexual assault. Anyway, so these are people who are vegan, who are in these bubbles of anti-speciesist, in quotes, activist vegan communities where this sexual assault shit is happening.
Yeah.
So it proves just because you're vegan does not mean anything.
Yeah.
These people are enforcing patriarchy as well.
Yeah, you get racist vegans, you get sexist vegans. So it doesn't logically follow that if you understand what speciesism is, that you will automatically be completely rid of all of your oppressive thinking.
Yeah, and the one point I wanted to make is that by adding extra politics to veganism is not removing anything or taking anything away from animals. Activists are humans. So therefore we have human interaction. Anti-racism feminism is going to make the communities of activists stronger and ultimately better for animals.
And in fact, if the individuals understand why those issues are important, then they understand the modes of thinking in feminism and all of those other issues, us as individuals, our own ways of thinking about speciesism will be strengthened. So our veganism will be stronger as individuals if we understand the interlinks between different forms and modes of oppression.
Exactly. If you introduce anti-sexism to anti-racism, you are not taking away from the fight of anti-racism. It's strengthening it.
Exactly.
You're not taking anything away from the animals by adding good politics to it. So
Yeah.
get rid of this like twisted centrist bullshit that everybody has to be included, even far-right Nazis and stuff. Honestly.
So again, similar to with individuals, with organizations, I think just be aware of why you want to get involved, who you want to get involved with, and what are their aims, what are the implications of what they're doing, and are they having an impact, and is your role necessary there Could you be doing it somewhere else? Could you be doing something else? Is it making you feel uncomfortable? Like maybe there's a different kind of activism that's actually better suited for you, but your need for a sense of belonging might be overriding that, and you're just kind of throwing yourself into something that's not really meaningful just for that sake of belonging.
And do they silence your identity? Do they silence
or other
politics?
people's identities?
Exactly. Do they regard themselves as the most important group on earth?
Yeah.
Do they think that they are more important than anyone else in veganism? There's a lot of warning signs.
So we've already spoken for quite a lot longer than we thought this episode. We thought this episode was going to be really short. So we're just going to kind of wrap it up. And we've spoken about what could be problematic in terms of individuals and organizations. So I also just wanted to make a quick point about activists that seem kind of neutral. So what about, we're talking about the importance of intersectionality and recognizing other forms of oppression. But there are also a lot of activists who I think are pretty decent. Well, not a lot. There are some, a few, a handful, one or two, maybe one, who seem to be really legit and they advocate for animal rights, but that seems to be the only thing they do. So we just wanted to kind of mention, when is this okay? Like, should we be promoting people who only speak about animal rights and nothing else? So the point that I wanted to make about that is, yes, you can promote someone who is only talking about animal rights. The kind of caveat to that is, if something problematic comes up, obviously that needs to be addressed. If, say, for example, on one of their social media posts, someone makes a racist comment and they don't address it, that is a problem. So I don't think anyone needs to be an activist for every social justice movement. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that if you're an animal rights activist, you must also be an outspoken feminist and an outspoken, anti-racism activist. All of that's great, but maybe you're not as educated on all of those issues or don't feel comfortable speaking on all of those issues. That's fine. But you have to address issues as they arise. So if someone makes a racist comment, that has to be called out. So if you're following activists that you don't think are problematic, or you haven't seen anything about them that seems problematic, that's cool. Promote them if their messaging is good and clear and promotes animal rights in a good way. But just be wary that if something does come up, look at whether or not they call out those issues.
Because it doesn't take up more time to care about other things.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an activist, like you said, but you should be against racism.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that they have to make anti-racist posts every day, but if someone makes a racist comment on something that they've said, then they should call that out. And I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Then just a quick little summary who we think we should be supporting, some examples. Who would you suggest people do support if they haven't heard of them?
I mean, I would check out Angela Davis. She was part of the Black Panthers. You can learn about the prison industrial complex at the same time. Afin Silko, who wrote Afroism, which I've mentioned. So you can learn about Black veganism. Lauren Ornelas, who's involved with the Food Empowerment Project. They focus on the poor and food justice issues. Carol J. Adams can learn about the intersections of feminism and veganism. Abreeze Harper, Dr. Abreeze Harper, who writes about anti-racism at the same time. And Christopher Sebastian is awesome.
Yeah, and actually really funny as well.
Yeah.
And no bullshit. So basically what Gary Yourofsky thinks he is and is not. Straightforward, no bullshit.
Not apologetic.
Calls people out hard.
Hard. Super funny.
Yeah, but also very much focused on animal rights while also being outspoken on a lot of issues.
And also not just disgustingly violent and throwing the word rape around everywhere.
Exactly.
And there's a lot more that you'll find through all of these people. So we can also post some more links in the show notes.
Yeah, and also if you have other suggestions, send them our way. But I think we've pretty much summarized our feelings on this topic. So I think it's pretty clear. We don't think you should promote anyone just for the sake of veganism. Just be careful about who you're promoting, but that's not to say don't promote anyone or share their stuff. It can be really beneficial. But I just wanted to say, as a kind of closing point, that we all need to realize that there is no one group or one activist that is going to achieve animal liberation. If someone has a powerful speech or has done something that you think will help people to understand speciesism and go vegan, that's cool. But if you then realize that they also do and say a lot of problematic things that oppress others, you don't need to find reasons to justify their behavior. You don't need to defend them just because we so-called need as many vegans as we can get and, we need to be united in the fight for animals. You don't need to do that because there are other people doing important work that deserve to be supported and promoted. So find them instead and promote them. Because at the end of the day, promoting harmful ideas and people are not going to make animal liberation a reality. It's going to slow down the progress of the movement by marginalizing other people who would otherwise join the fight for animals. So if we want a bigger and more unified movement, we need to be mindful of our own privileges and the ways in which the oppression of other people plays a role within the animal rights movement. We cannot achieve animal liberation without human liberation.
Such an important point. And I think we can both agree that more than ever, ideas like intersectionality and total liberation are super important.
Yeah. So also send us your favorite activists, writers, academics, organizations, anyone that you think deserves more support and awareness. We'd love to learn about more people who are doing cool stuff, and we'll obviously share that on social media and stuff as well. And yeah, if you also have any organizations or people that you think are problematic that are being promoted, send that to us as well, because we also want to know so that we can further inform ourselves and anyone we might speak to about them. So yeah.
If you have any questions or comments, like we said, send us an email at letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com, or message us on Instagram or Facebook. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So until next time,
Love and liberation.